Hello there guys and welcome back to the channel. So in today's video I'm going to be trying my best to explain exactly how Sorcerer Supreme works, what she can do, what she can't do, and how best to use her. So we're going to start with her three blessings. So basically they are fairly simple in the nature. The one that you look like passive fury buff, the one that she generally starts with, grants her extra damage. The one that looks like a shield gives her an armor and perfect block chance, and the one that looks like a power gain icon basically gives her power steal on her hits based on the opponent's current power. And then everything else she can do is connected with these blessings and runes. Runes are effects that can be carried over and kind of like delayed. If you would imagine putting an effect and putting it in the bag and storing it up for later when it's needed, for instance. Activating each special attack grants you X amount of runes. Activating level 1 grants you 2 runes and uses one of those 2 immediately, so you net 1. Activating level 2 pauses all of the current rune effects for 5 seconds, grants you 3 runes and uses 1 rune. Whenever you activate special attack, if you have any stored runes, you also use one of each that you have stored. So in one single special attack, you are able to activate all 3 effects from each of the blessings that you receive. And lastly, special 3 initially basically kind of locks in one permanent rune that will activate whenever you use any special attack for rest of the fight. And then whenever you activate consecutive level 3s, you gain attack based on how many runes you have stored in total, and also it stores 2 additional runes of any of the effects that are the one that you basically have already made infinite. And that might sound complicated, but once you actually start using her, it's very simple, because all of the rune effects are directly connected to kind of like the type of abilities pretty much. So when you activate a special attack in your armor phase, you trigger regen. So regen obviously kind of goes well with your defense, with your damage mitigation and regeneration. And that passive regen is one of the coolest things Sorcerer Supreme has, because it lets you regenerate 85% of any block damage you receive. Plus obviously there is a slight amount of generic regen in it that basically heals you over time. Then effect of power control blessing might be the least correlated, but if you think about it in terms of control, as in power control, and then the effect of that would be slow debuff, which grants you more control over the fight, because you can manage unstoppables and evades much easier. So the purple blessing gives you slow debuffs. And then you have the attack aggressive blessing, and what other more kind of like aggressive damage inflicting buff than armor break. And then it kind of like all comes together. Your idea, your goal is to make sure that you have enough blessings of whichever one effect is kind of like more important for the fight. In ideally kind of vanilla conditions, you want to activate all of them and kind of like store enough. Like we can see, I have at least 2 of each of the rune active, so whenever I'm going to activate next 2 special attacks, whichever blessing I use them on, I will gain all 3 of effects. Additional thing that Sorcerer Supreme does have is you can change whichever blessing you are on with your heavy attack. Thus you are able to filter out the one that might not be needed at the time. And there is a pre-fight ability which allows you to start whichever blessing you want to start. So as we can see, in a vanilla matchup where opponent has no buffs, where opponent doesn't have any kind of like special things going for them, and where you can't abuse like Mystic Dispersion, or you can't benefit too much of the power steal, she doesn't really have the highest damage output. You do finish the fight after a while with 100% health, but the damage output isn't really the highest one. I'm sure you could have played that fight in a manner where you deal more damage than I did per hit, like spam your heavy attacks more, make sure that you have your attack blessing on you active more, and so on and so forth. But in any matchup where buffs are involved and where you can trigger Mystic Dispersion, thus have access to extra power, you are actually able to ramp up your damage output quite considerably. Now, once again, I'm not going to really kind of like perfect in these matchups, and keep in mind there are literally 0 synergies active currently, and I have a fairly defensive mastery setup. And still we are able to, as we can see, stack 3 slows, 3 armor breaks, shut down that unstoppable permanently, do some decent punchy stuff that are not nice 15k crits, 16k non-crit on level 2, have 4 stacks of armor break. We're not hitting the hardest, but we're certainly doing much kind of like better job, considering that Juggernaut's also quite tanky. And in addition to that, keep in mind that that slow debuff that provides evades and unstoppables is active throughout the entire fight. So slow is another thing that she is extremely useful for. There aren't many Mystic champions. I think now Dragon Man is only a second Mystic champion who has access to slow, and that is quite valuable in itself. And the fact that it is extremely easy to maintain that slow effect for the entire fight is certainly quite unique. Now we jumped into variant 5 to demonstrate her nullification abilities with the level 1. I have not explained that quite yet, and at the same time I will be explaining the idea behind her being able to absorb block damage. Therefore she will automatically be viable for a plethora of difficult and hard matchups where block damage is an issue. So the way her nullification works, it's purely and exclusively connected to level 1. Level 1 is the only special attack that has nullification abilities, and it works kind of in a form of an aura. You can consider it similar to, let's say, Mephisto's aura that deal damage. Now you do have a guaranteed nullify upon the activation of your special 1, and that nullifies 1 buff. Then for next 10 or so seconds, I forgot the duration of the aura, you nullify the buffs kind of like every second or every 0.8 seconds by standing close to opponent. Meaning if you are taking hits in a block, or you're hitting opponent's block, or if you're just landing a combo, you will be nullifying all of the buffs opponents are gaining with a slight delay. Overall, it's still quite potent and still quite useful ability. Here we can see that I just took that level 2 in a block, and that unstoppable just got nullified. So even in a matchup such as this, where you have to forfeit a large portion of your damage output due to opponent being debuff immune, therefore you're not able to stack armor break debuffs. Even in a matchup such as this, where opponent is being unstoppable and you cannot place slow debuff on the opponent, she finds a way how to be pretty much the best option for many of these fights by being able to take extraordinary amounts of punishment in her block and regenerating practically all of the health, and at the same time being able to nullify the opponent's buffs, thus cycling her special attacks more frequently, getting lots of regeneration as we can see here, and even kind of like maintaining to regenerate whatever damage I took kind of like at the beginning of the fight and cover for my slip-ups. So that is certainly one of the most unique ways how to fight with a champion in the game, because there's close to nothing that functions similarly in the game, and it actually is far more useful than most people like to admit and most people realize. Now, the downside of Sorcerer Supreme is that, yes, her damage output might not be the greatest in kind of like short, bursty fights. She's definitely not your go-to uncollected quest clearing champion. There will be many champions that can finish the fights quicker. Her damage output is good, but she needs a while to open up, and she needs at least kind of like a 40-30 hit fight before she starts kind of like doing an optimal amount of damage. And the obvious second weakness would be the fact that she relies on Mystic Dispersion quite a bit if you want to kind of like get the best damage results. She is not suicide friendly, and there are certain drawbacks obviously, but she is a champion that will come through for you when going gets tough. When the matchups are hard, when most of the champions can't quite do the fights, she can. Additionally, she does not necessarily has to be awakened. Awakened ability certainly helps. It makes her blessing effects more potent, and in addition, she gains increased ability accuracy. In a standard matchup, increased ability accuracy doesn't really do anything for her because all of her abilities are set on 100%. But when you are facing champions like Domino, for instance, that's super helpful. When you are facing any nodes that would reduce your ability accuracy, that's also helpful. And another important thing to remember, as I have mentioned before, if you want to kind of like get the most decent, best damage output out of this champion, you do ideally want to run Mystic Dispersion, and you do want to seek for fights where at least one or two buffs kind of like pop up now and then. They really do give a significant difference, because the ideal rotation in playing Sorcerer Supreme is spamming your level 2s as quickly as frequently as possible, because those pause the slow debuffs, those pause the regens, those pause the armor breaks, and you are able to stack many of them, and by doing so your damage just goes up and up and up and up, and you regen more and more, and that is a huge difference in her kind of like playability. She's still a fantastic champion. Even if opponent doesn't have any buffs, she still will be able to maintain her shield for entire fight, so on and so forth. But if you want to gain multiple stacks of these effects, like multiple sets of armor breaks, multiple regens, you do want to use her into fights where she has access to at least some buffs that she can nullify or that would expire and feed the Mystic Dispersion. Now, I have an absolute ton of Sorcerer Supreme gameplay on my channel. I think at this point I have certainly enjoyed using her. I do value her highly. I could actually consider possibly ranking her above Black Widow Clairvoyant. It's hard to do that because Black Widow Clairvoyant has many different immunities, but overall I generally think that I use her more frequently than I do Black Widow Clairvoyant. In any case, you guys possibly have seen me use her to solo Apocalypse, Uncollected Boss. I have soloed X23 in Labyrinth of Legends with her, I think, and I have uploaded quite a lot of videos with her. So if you type in Sorcerer Supreme KT1, you guys could find some interesting videos. I had an amazing incursions run with her as well. She's so good for incursions with sustainability, with insane amounts of damage. It's just crazy fun. But yeah, so here we are in Act 6, and here's again quite good showcase what happens when opponent consistently kind of has access to buffs. We can see, even though it's Footloose node, we are completely ignoring it. I don't care about that at all. I don't care about her Furies and auto block because I'm consistently managing to nullify everything, and even if she does auto block, that's perfectly fine. And yeah, there is 5 armor breaks and I'm hitting like a truck, and she was like a 300k Medusa, and I finished that fight out in absolutely no time in 60 hits. So that's not bad damage output at all. And all of the previous gameplay that you saw up until then was without using any synergies at all whatsoever. So it is quite safe to say that yes, she does benefit from her synergies, but she does not rely on her synergies. She does not rely on her sig ability much either. The most important thing about running Sorcerer Supreme is having Mystic Dispersion, ideally, and then you're gonna have a much more pleasant time. And now I'm gonna bring her in a random kind of like Cosmic Champion heavy lane in 6.3, I believe. I think that's the Hammock boss one. Obviously with Groot it's a bit tricky because with MD5 I'm consistently just hitting level 3s, and obviously Groot shrugs off my debuffs quicker from my level, well, yeah, my armor breaks, my slow debuffs. But at the same point we can see that even now I'm at 100% health, consistently spamming special 3s, and just having fun with the fight in general, finishing up with a nice 39k crit there, no problem. But now we're gonna move on and check out the Venom fight. So keep in mind, this time I am running synergies. I have Hulkbuster, who makes armor breaks more potent. I have Symbiote Supreme, who gives me prowess every time I change my blessings, I believe, or fill a bar of power. Then I had synergy that stops her nullification order during special attacks, thus making it last longer, which is obviously super useful as well. And I have Stone Pyramid X that lets me start with the bar of power, which is an amazing synergy for her. Here we can see that a few hits in, 2 armor breaks on already, very solid amount of damage from a level 2. Take entire level 2 in a block, pretty much at full health still. like it's nobody's business. So 3 armor breaks are active here, and I'm going to be going for another level 2 in just a second. I think unfortunately an armor break will expire, but at this point we're dropping another level 2 that crits for 50k. Why not? And that's with just 3 armor breaks. You can get sometimes easily to like 5 and 6. And now final level 1. Nice crits down there, finished on full yellow bar. And that's an Act 6 opponent with nearly 300k health down and 54 hits. So she's not the hardest hitting champion in matchups where opponent doesn't get buffs. When opponent gains buffs, and so long as you're fighting some relatively decently high health pools, she is actually in fact a really hard hitting champion with a really hard hitting level 2s and level 3s especially. But that'll also be more or less it for today's video. I do hope that you guys understand Sorcerer Supreme better. Kind of like quick last parting notes. Mystic Dispersion, important. Signature level, not important. Suicides, not friendly to them at all. And what else do you need? No, synergies, not reliant on them whatsoever. Her base mechanics described in the beginning of the video. Other than that, I'll let me know what else you guys are interested in, and I will do my best to either make a video or answer any and all questions you have. But that is it for today. I hope you guys have enjoyed today's video, and if you have, hit that like button, hit that sub button, and I'm gonna catch you guys soon. See ya.